While Justin's away, the Jeff will play. It is a old school edition of Locked On Guardians. We have a lot of things that occurred. Maybe not the biggest bits of news, but we have a lot to talk about. So get ready to kick it old school on today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
Tanner Bobby the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. I'm going to start by saying you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. I am Jeff Ellis. I'm one of your hosts, and today I'm your only host. I was the original host of Locked On Guardians. Before that, I was a nationally featured draft and prospect analyst at Scout and 24/7. And yes, I am wearing my Locked On shirt today. We have a lot to talk about. I know it feels like not a whole lot is happening in baseball, but there's been a lot of things that have been occurring that, affect the Guardians. Some minor things, but if you're going through, minor things add up. And my new cat wants to disrupt the show, so I'm just going to kind of bring her in for a bit here. But I want to thank you all for joining me. To those who brought up the teaching stuff, I want to say thank you. I am a special education teacher by day. Middle school is where I teach. That question seems to come up a lot. That is the day job. And to everyone, if you are using this to listen while you're traveling before the holidays, I also want to say please travel safely. It sounds like it is going to be a rough few days. But let's start with some news rundowns. There was kind of an interesting bit of news, at least I think, with the trade between Kansas City and Cincinnati. And two guys that I have never been the biggest fan of when it comes to Jonathan India and when it comes to Brady Singer. I do think the Royals come out ahead of this. And the reason for that is Joey Weimer is interesting, and they got nothing out of their outfield. Maybe they can figure it out. That dude has tools for days. And we just talked about the Morgan trade. Weimer was a super toolsy guy who struggled at the University of Cincinnati, who the Brewers did a great job with. And I don't know if he's going to be an everyday guy or not, but I think he's an interesting addition. Jonathan India just had the best or second best year of his career. Was it a mirage? That's what it really comes down to. For a guy who's been a terrible defender, he wasn't last year, and for a guy who's struggled to hit since his rookie year, he hit. I have to see if he can be just like average at both. I think it turns into a win for the Royals, makes the Royals more dangerous next year against the Guardians, because it gives them another reliable bat. I will be curious to see how they then deploy, Michael Massey. He was really good for them in a platoon role. They find a spot for him, I'm sure, to keep that role. But the Royals offense had about as many struggles as Cleveland's offense, if not more. Bobby Witt was spectacular. Getting him some support. They've got a good top of their rotation. I am curious to see how they kind of make up for the back of their rotation with this trade. Just because every team needs pitching. That's the dirty little secret in baseball right now. Every team needs starting pitching. And for me, with that trade today, if I pull them up, it's like Kyle Wright is penciled to be their fifth starter. Alec Marsh was not great for them last year as a 4. They've got their big 3. Kyle Wright has been incredibly inconsistent for his year, but basically he's not been inconsistent. He had one good year. So I guess if you really believe in your stuff and your ability to coach guys up, since you helped Cole Ragans figure it out, and you helped, by reports, it's former Guardians pitching coach Ruben Niebla, who gave some parting news to Seth Lugo, who helped him out the door find success. But yeah, they're going to rely on Kyle Wright. So that could come back to hurt Kansas City. There might be that. And why am I not as big of a fan of it for the Braves? Singer has terrible splits. He is kind of a Rugi, essentially, as a starting pitcher. Lefties demolish him. He's leaving a park that was pretty home run suppressive relative to all things, and going to a park that is anything but that. He might get utterly obliterated by left-handed pitching in Cincinnati. That's the only reason why. I did think overall Singer has more value than India, so that's kind of a weird statement to say that, I think he's the most valuable player in this deal, but I don't like it for Cincinnati just because I don't know if he's a great fit for the Reds in that park. The Reds need to trade infielders. It's not a bad trade by any means, but I do worry about the overall fit. But that's an interesting one, and it's going to affect the division because, hey, we just saw one team get a lot better. at least offensively, because league average was a big improvement for a Royals team that struggled this year. Let's talk about the things that directly affected Cleveland. They traded Peter Strzelecki. That's right. The Pirates are so desperate for bullpen help that they decide to offer probably almost no cash, but something to jump in and get the DFA'd player. Because once you waive those guys, we're at the point of the year where you can see what you can get. That's why we thought maybe they would trade Valera. We haven't heard any news on that, so we'll see if it happens. So the Guardians move him out. Get a little bit of cash. Doesn't really have a huge impact. The only thing they could do that would get them less value, I'd have to look and see if Pittsburgh has any international money left for this current period, because Cleveland is sitting on a few $100,000 of international money that they're not going to spend. So technically the least valuable thing would be to trade for international money that neither side is going to use. But the other bits of information that are just interesting pieces of the picture. We talked about Tristan McKenzie, who got $1.95 million last to He was estimated to get 2.4. So we talk about, $450,000 in savings against projection. And then Ben Lively signed for, I want to say 2.25. Now his projection was going to be 3.2. So he took a deal for close to $1 million under his arbitration estimate, which is good for Cleveland and good for him. Stability has not been there for Lively in his career. So that sets him up to have a chance to, I think you started the year with Ben Lively as one of your 5 starters based on how things went this year. Maybe I'm wrong in that assessment. If it goes poorly, you can always reassess. But yeah, I thought that was a solid get for Cleveland. And then I think, to me, I found Sam Henches maybe the most interesting, because we talked about would he be released or not because of his situation. And I just kind of kept coming back to the fact when Henches is healthy, and that has been a problem throughout his career. He's had a bunch of ups and downs and little bruises. He's a guy who's always kind of nicked up. Now, this is not a kind of nicked up. This is another massive surgery, and he won't pitch till 2026. And he's had, previous issues with that. But at the same time, like he was last year, Justin and I said, the second most important player in that bullpen. They're going to miss the lefty this year. I think Herron is probably in line for some regression. We'll have to see what Zabrowski can do, but I think there's no way around it. You miss Henches. You could make a case back in 2022 that he was, again, their second most, if not maybe down the stretch, their best reliever over Clase at the time. So, and Cleveland showed that because they only got $70,000 in savings versus his arbitration estimate. Actually less than that. I think it's $67,000 in savings. So they just decided to pay him. They didn't get into too much of a back and forth here. They value him. They're hoping to get him back in 2026 and have him be another part of the pen. And maybe they can keep making some trades by having so many pen pieces. Every year someone's coming back from injury. But the picture in this is that they saved, with the Morgan trade and these arbitration ones, but another $2.5 million, which, if you remember from earlier this year, my estimate had them at about $18.5 million below what they spent a year ago. That would put them at about it'd be 3 million, not 18, so 21 million. So when we're looking at about 21 million, that does give them some opportunities and ways to help this team to go out and add some pieces to make this team better. I don't know how things are going to go when it comes to the TV contract. I think that is a terribly frightening thing. And I know there's going to be the people out there who are going to, who jump in every time this happens about how cheap Dolan is. I want to point out again, there was a Scrooge Index done by Travis Sawchuk, one of the best baseball writers around, over on The Score. And Cleveland came in, 17th. 17th most Scroogiest team, least Scroogiest team in baseball. They are estimated to spend roughly 48% of their revenue on payroll. Now, the highest team that is not the Mets was at 67%, and that's the Dodgers, because beyond payroll, there's, you have to pay your staff, you have to pay your coaches. There's a lot of other bits and pieces that go on that's just not payroll. So the Mets are the only team operating for sure at a loss. Cleveland is, like I said, they have, it'd be they're 17th. They'd be the 13th most Scroogiest team in baseball. So they're not, they're not exactly going out there and spending a ton, but they're not the worst. And one thing, when you are saving money like this, it isn't to put it in the owner's pocket as often, so they can turn around and do more with it. And I'll also say this: a year ago, they knew they were going to have to spend a ton on the draft. That was part of their operating expenses as well. They had the largest draft class ever by money signed. So when I talk about the fact that they have 20 million less to spend this year, and that's one of those things that also comes out of that operating budget. So a year ago they were at 48%, but if we added in like money spent on draft classes, they would probably be closer to middle of the. I mean, they're already middle of the pack, but we're talking probably dead middle of the pack. Like we went in and add that money in, but I bring this up because we tend to not think about the draft in this way and the effect it has on the money brought in. But they did spend over 20 million on the draft this year. Next year, you're probably looking at half that. Honestly, they're going to their competitive balance pick is going to be at the end of the second round. Their first round pick is going to be the third or fourth last pick of the first round. They're not going to have anywhere near as much money. So one can make a case that 21 million could be closer to 30 million in total spendings difference. So that is something we should definitely be tracking and keeping in mind. And I'm bringing this up because tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about some free agents to know, some players to look at. It's not the best class, but there's some interesting talent out there. We're finally going to talk about some of those under the radar players. And I do think Cleveland has money to spend. Again, the TV contract is just a mess right now. And that is the one thing that could derail everything, is being overly cautious there. But I think there's a case to be made that this team might have, like I said, close to $30 million to spend, subtracted from their operating budget. They're not the Rays. They're not the Athletics. Heck, they're not the Tigers. Those are the three worst teams in baseball year ago in terms of the Scrooge Index. They got some money to play with, and I think they will play with it. We're going to come back, talk about some minor league thoughts I had, take some questions from you, all on a very special solo show of Locked On Guardians. I love it when we have a new sponsor, and I'm tempted to use this deal right here because we got Omaha Steaks. I mean, I've been hearing about Omaha Steaks my whole life. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off site-wide on their Cyber Monday deal at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early, and you score an extra $30 off with the promo code MLB. So think of all that savings. That's like 3 different ways you're saving with 5 generations of experience. Like I said, quality company, been around forever. They constantly delivers the world's best steak experience, and their gifting experts have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with a thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouth-watering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide during the cyber sale at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with the promo code MLB and a $30 reward card when you shop early. So that's 30 off, 30 reward card, and 50% off site-wide. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com and an extra $30 off with the promo code MLB. Minimum purchase may apply. And we are back. It's the old "and we are back" that lets people know when they can stop their fast forward. I'm kidding to my bosses. Sometimes I say the out loud part out loud, or the in my head part out loud. That's how I'm supposed to phrase it. But either way, we've talked about the minor signings, the players, and what that set up, and why I think, again, check out tomorrow's episode. Justin and I have put together a list. We've done research to talk about the free agents that could matter to this team. It's not a deep class, but it'll be an interesting class, and we're going to talk about that. So before I get into your questions, I did want to take a moment and talk about prospects, because people come to this podcast specifically, I know, for that. I was kind of thinking about today, like, who's the most underrated prospect in the Guardian system? And I did like a Google search to see, people doing articles. Now, I kind of ignored the articles where they picked one underrated prospect from every team. That's not what I want. The interesting thing is the Google AI put Matt Wilkinson in their list. I know Joe Doyle put CJ Kapis. And to me, if you are a deep prospect guy, or if you're listening to the show, those aren't really the under the radar prospects, are they? Those are guys you know. So I wanted to put together a under the radar prospect for part of the show today, because I know people come to this podcast for prospects. So I thought I'd do something fun. I'd talk about the news, talk about some prospects, and then take a few questions from you. So again, let me know in the comments below what you think of this idea. Do you like my rogue approach here? Speaking of rogue, let's do for today's question of the day, your favorite X-Men in the comments below. For those who are curious, favorite Nintendo, a lot of Final Fantasy, which I never played the original. I have to be honest with people. I jumped in at 2 and 3 on the Super Nintendo, which I know aren't really 2 and 3. Let's talk underrated prospects though. Tommy Hawk is small. He is a tiny human being, 5'8". I've talked about trying to trade for Jorge Barlosa, I believe is his name, with Arizona. This might be Cleveland's version of that. As a 21-year-old, He was a draft eligible sophomore. I want to say when they drafted him in the 6th round, gave him full slot, full freight. Last time they took an undersized guy in the 6th round. Wasn't that Stephen Kwan? Am I wrong? This is totally top of my head, so I could be wrong with this. I'm not saying that he's Stephen Kwan, but there's some Stephen Kwan like things. Comes from he doesn't have quite the average. He's probably a little passive, but maybe not. The thing that makes you go maybe not is the fact that in 88 games a year ago, yes, the walk rate's 15%. We know that can't be sustained. But a under 20% strikeout rate, high BAPIPs at A ball, again, that is a sign of quality contact. Batting average of 263 down there. So you're kind of looking at and you're seeing a lot of positive signs. He also stole 37 bases. Like there's good traits. There's some interesting things with Hawk. Now I was not as high on him as Justin was, and his younger brother I think is up there now as well. If you're curious, when high A, when Stephen Kwan was in high A, he had a 280 batting average compared to the 263 that Hawk currently had. So not too dissimilar. He only had 53 walks to 51 strikeouts. I don't have those percentages quite pulled up, but I think Tommy Hawk is a player to look at, watch. He doesn't get talked about. I haven't seen him on any top 30, but he's one of those guys that, he's got plus speed. He has a strong eye at the plate. Looks like there could be a chance at least an average hit tool. Good defense, runs well. Sometimes you get a little bit more from those guys. No, he was a right age person. I don't know why it listed his age as 20 when he's here. So he was just a junior, not a draft eligible sophomore. And then the other player that took in the draft the round before and gave full slot to, I was a little bit surprised, was Christian Knapczyk, because he didn't have a whole lot that stood out. Over at Blast Baseball, Joe Torval, I know, was a big fan of his, and he's another guy. Good walk, good K rates, good production, though he is, like Hawk, they're both a little bit older for high A. Just similar players. He didn't steal as many bases. He's probably more of a utility guy, but BAPIP isn't as high. I think Hawk is better than Knapczyk, but I know there are those who liked his profile quite a bit, and probably players that we didn't discuss at all that we should discuss a bit. I'm going to just throw in Jonathan Rodriguez as someone that I am probably underrating in terms of most underrated. I mean, the dude has just been productive. Like I've talked about this throughout how many years doing this podcast, that you want to look for the guys who are constantly producing in the minors and give them opportunities. In 24 games in high A in 2021 and in 28 games in 2022 in double A. Those are the only times he didn't have a WRC plus above 100. Like his almost throughout his career has been over 130. He's increased his walk rates. He's cut, his strikeout rates have been a little bit up and down, but he's always had good BAPIPs. He probably deserves an opportunity. I'm hoping he gets a look this spring. I'm probably not giving him enough credit, because if he was on another team, I'd be saying Cleveland should try and trade for this guy. They could use someone who's got power potential. It hasn't been there, but I'm probably underestimating him. And then I think all of baseball, if we want to say most underrated prospect on this team, it's Cooper Ingle to me. Potential catcher. Every team is currently looking for starting pitching and catching. You can go find every single article on every single team that's mentioning those two things. And Ingle had the highest WRC plus in the minors on this team. He walked more than he struck out a year this past year, I believe, moving from high A to double A. He doesn't have to hit for power. He's a catcher. That's just a bonus. Like he tapped into a little more this year, but if he can just be a solid production and, a solid defender, if you are 55 and 55 at both, you're a top 5 player at your position. So I think Cooper Ingle is probably someone who, should be higher on my list. He should be getting at least top 10 discussion, and that hasn't been the case. And like I said, everyone wants to talk about Wilkinson. Everyone wants to talk about Kafis. Most impressive year last year belonged to Cooper Ingle in the minor leagues for this team, especially when you consider the transition to catcher and how incredibly difficult that is. That's the hardest transition in baseball. So Cooper Ingle, to me, number one, most underrated. And then here's your bonus. Wilfredo Antunez is a little bit older for high A. 3 of these guys are a little bit older for high A, and he spent most of the year in low A, so that's why I'm not going to give him quite the mention. But he's been well thought of for a while. I don't think he gets taken in the Rule 5, but he had one of the best WRC pluses in the minors again this year. I think, we tend to forget him and not even think about him as someone who could be at risk. The pitching side of things, I was kind of going through and looking at BAPIPs, because that can also be a sign that guys are, for pitchers, that their stuff is really good and that they don't have quality contact against them. And Alaska Abney, I know is someone I keep kind kind of poo-pooing, but he's got a weird approach, and there might be a world where that works for him, where it works enough for him to be a major league pitcher. Major league pitch, he's not a pitch, but be a major league pitcher, just because it seems like so far guys are not seeing him cleanly through the upper minors. And I will say the caveat here is a year ago this time, Will Dion was a very close to being a top 10 prospect for me because he had just done it every single level. And AAA is a whole nother animal anymore with the elimination of short season baseball. Like everyone's kind of, all the levels are just not as good. A lot of guys get pushed up quicker. And yeah, we have to see the other guys. I throw back to Zane Morehouse and Magnus Ellerts with, some of the other bigger names. They haven't been as focused on prospect wise, but again, most underrated prospect in the Guardian system, I think it has to be Cooper Engel. It's the production being the highest composite production in the minors while moving from a utility role to a focused catcher role. Like normally we see guys stumble. We don't see them step up offensively while transitioning to the hardest position on the infield. So Cooper Engel, most underrated prospect in Cleveland system, the guy that needs more discussion, and go back and listen to an interview with him. It feels a little self-serving to say that now, but I think it is worth going back and listening to. When I was just trying to find the numbers, he really stood out for me. We're going to come back and I'm going to take some of the questions that you have asked me through Twitter and through YouTube here. So again, thank you for joining us, and come back for the mailbag section of today's Locked On Guardians. Let's talk about our good friends over at FanDuel. They've been with us for a while, and it's a perfect time to go over to FanDuel right now and just bet on the Cavs, because I don't think they're going to lose again. It's going to be 81-1 this year, so you want to head over there and check it out. Or maybe if you had a hunch about the Browns and some weather success, that would have been a chance to win big. So get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets all in one place. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to check out the stats, view live play, and so much more, you can do it all in the same place where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, and a official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Go bet on the Cavs. They seem like a sure bet right now. And we want to thank you all, and go check out a sister podcast on the network. Maybe go check out Locked On Cubs to get more information about the Cubs prospect. See how they mention and talk about Alfonso. I can't wait to say Ribeiro. It's not even the right name. Alfonso and Rosario. Let's get into your questions. We had a few. I already took Tom's, Marcetix, and I'm going to butcher everyone's name because by now I'll give my rundown. I haven't done in a while. I am ADD and dyslexic. I have a problem with pronunciation. I get everything wrong. So I apologize now for everything that I will get wrong. I can hear a name, but it still gets confused in my head. His question earlier was what I teach and what grade. I'm like, well, 3 to 4 different grades. It always depends on the year. I'm going to start with our blue skiers here. Finn in the land says, very, very random question. What's the latest outlook for Khalil Watson? Anything encouraging there? I mean, he's fine. He is just never going to have good contact. If you want the downside to Rosario, that's Watson. Like, Watson is he like 5'10", 5'11"? Yeah, he's like, they listen to 5'9". I think he's 5'10", so he's an inch or two shorter. But this is that guy who is all the tools in the world, who had amazing exit velocities. People doubted the power. He did have, if you want the encouragement here, he had 16 home runs this year. That is the most he's ever hit in a season. He did it in a park that is not the most home run friendly. So that's the encouragement. I think it's also encouraging that they moved him around a bit. I would like to see even more games at center field where you can, maybe if you're lucky, he's a Jose Siri type. Just the contact. That's the bugaboo. I called him the best draft at the end of the first round in the 2021 draft. I'll just be honest about that. So far, he's not living up to that. And he's made more waves for the off the field than on the field. He has been he has had no issues in Cleveland system, but he's the last guy who's kind of a knucklehead that Cleveland has acquired. I haven't heard anything since that. I think he's been, a good citizen by all accounts here. So yeah, I wish I could give you more, Bill. It's just I wish there was more there. He just hasn't. He's just been okay, and that's why he's not a top 30 guy for me anymore. With his tools, I need to see more, especially in the upper minors. John again, Infinity. What am I missing with Lane Thomas's defensive metrics? By my eye test, he seems fine, not Miles Straw, but not one of the worst center fielders in the league, like advanced stats seem to think. Problem with the eye test is often we just kind of see, oh, hey, he didn't make a big mistake. Like, remember when people got really mad at Gabby Arias because he would make these plays and he'd get the balls he probably shouldn't get to, and then he doesn't make the play on it. That is when we often misevaluate players. The thing with Lane Thomas is he's really bad coming in, and he's not great going out. Like, he doesn't have a lot of range. He gets to the ones that get to his range, but his range isn't great, and that's why advanced metrics don't love him. And he passes the eye test often because he gets to stuff near him. It just, the overall range is not what you want. And the issue is why he's a bad center fielder more than a right fielder is he does have a good arm, but you're expected to cover more range at center field, and he just does not cover that proper amount of range out there to make that work. And our last blue skyer is Richard. What are your thoughts on a Michael Conforto acquisition? He had a solid year last year, and he got better as year one. In the last 2 months, his bat speed rose 2 miles an hour. He had a 137 WRC plus with a 405 weighted OPP. He'll probably be relatively cheap, deal 2 for 1 to 2 years. MLB trade rumor has him at 2 years, $18 million. And the Samant page is nice. It's a lot similar to a lot of guys I've been looking at recently. Because the problem with all the expected stats is expected stats they're non-predictive. They just tell us like, hey, based on everything going well for him, like how did he perform? And he performed well. The thing you do like to see is that he barreled and he hard hit it well, and his bat speed was high. His chase was not. Like, those are things that and his walk rate was okay. The problem with Conforto, his arm was solid. He was, I believe, mostly a left fielder last year, and you need more of a right fielder, and he's probably more of a DH at this point. Like, he is quickly moving towards DH range with his play, and yeah, like we just talked about a lot of the problems with Thomas. They're kind of similar, and I think you can probably get away with him in right field. I just don't think it'll be very pretty. And yeah, he just doesn't get to everything he should. So you're definitely looking at a player who is going to struggle defensively. I mean, his catch rate is pretty not great. So it's all about the offense offensively. I don't have an issue with him. They need more guys who bat left-handed anymore with some of the imbalance in the lineup with how much this team is set up to succeed against righties. So I don't know. I think you might maybe stole some thunder for tomorrow's free agent show there, Richard. Heading over to, we had Twitter. Lucas Boyer asked thoughts after an article by Nick Pecorico, who writes Diamondbacks beat writer, about them looking to trade Jake McCarthy and Alec Thomas and looking for players to improve their roster. I guess bullpen help. Man, I loved Alec Thomas. That's another draft pick I got wrong. He was awesome in the minors. Unfortunately, he's just been Miles Straw in the big leagues. Great athlete. Dad was a trainer at the White Sox. I don't know if he still is or isn't. Fantastic, and then just hasn't been able to put together consistently at the big league level. Has no power. He really is just a younger Miles Straw. Jake McCarthy had a really good year last year, but he is plus Will Brennan. Like, if you go and you look at his profile, he only had 2 areas or 3 areas that were red. It was mostly blue. He's got no hard hit, no exit velocity. I mean, maybe, but that should be an extreme fallback. And I don't know because that problem is like, what do you really want to trade to go get that guy? I'm probably passing on both. Zeev, Everyday Zeev, asked about the progress of Travis B. It's been great. I mean, I don't have much to add because it's the off season, but he's done a really good job, and I have no concerns. TC at Mr. Jones 89, player most likely to get an impact when getting called up from AAA next year. With the way things are set up right now, I think it's going to be Messick or Peterson. I think it's going to be a starting pitcher because I don't trust the starting pitching at all. Maybe I could look at some of the hitters who have some opportunities who are getting closer. But right now, to me, it's starting pitching, or maybe it's a reliever. It's someone like Alaman. I just don't think we have not seen a lot of hitters come up and excel and stick around. There's not been a lot of staying power, unfortunately. So I'm going to go with one of the pitchers. I think Masick or Peterson could be a guy who could stick around for a good chunk of time. I thought I saw someone who no puppet at Ellis Legs. Think Cleveland has their eye on anyone in the Rule 5? I don't. But if they were, I think, if we're talking about who they could maybe look at, Sammy Ciani just had a fantastic Arizona Fall League, though we know the dangers of the Arizona Fall League. He's a younger brother. They just traded for another younger brother. And he had some swing changes this year that enabled him, some big changes this past year in high A. He's like, I think he's a better prospect than Petey Halpin, but, Ciani was just in high A. He did get up to double A, but he's barely played. And that's why the Reds didn't protect him, thinking, hey, he hasn't played that much at the upper minors, whereas Halpin has, and there's some similarities with defense. And then the other player is kind of looking at earlier in terms of, another outfielder, Kalie Rosario was hurt, didn't play a bunch this year. I thought they might like him back in 2020 out of high school. He's got some power, right-handed bat, had some good, another guy with good AFL. I don't know, though. I don't think they have their eyes necessarily on anyone. And then Kian at Inter Parasec 24. I was talking about scary mascots earlier. What is the thing you're most worried or scared about the Guardians might not address before next season starts, whether it's the organization thing, like something in the farm system, position player, contract extensions, pitching? I think it's contract extensions. And the reason is, the upside of doing this podcast for as long as we have is, hey, we've got some inside information. We find out some more things. And it feels like at points that they're a little, if I want to say gun shy, but when they did extensions recently, there were 4 players. It was Jose, which shouldn't really count because that's Jose, and they got him at a sweetheart deal. Then you had Clase, which has been fantastic. But then you also had Miles Straw and Andres Jimenez, and those have both gone poorly. Let's be honest, at the best, poorly. I mean, those deals are both underwater. Those are both 2 contracts underwater. So they've been a bit, afraid to, it feels like, go out and offer anything good. And what's sneaked out through agents and things like that is they aren't matching the contracts being offered by other teams to players. And that is a concern for me, because you have to try to keep some of your talent, and you need to start at a young age trying to lock guys up. And, I'll say at the same time, I was the one who's like, you have to lock up Bieber, and then Bieber had regression. So, maybe I'm not always right. I thought Jimenez was a slam dunk. I thought Straw, we spent forever looking for a center fielder. He doesn't even have to be that good. Give me a guy who's just below average with his defense. And it hasn't worked out. So I kind of get what they're going for, because you often end up paying for guys early 30s, and then you don't necessarily know what you have there. But at the same time, I think it makes it really hard, A, to have continuity, and B, to have success when you're not keeping anyone, because you're always looking to replace them. And as good of a job as this front office does, and I think they do a spectacular job, frankly, with the resources they do have in place, is you can't do that. You just can't replace, because there's so many players. The hit rate is so low relative to all things. So when you're replacing a proven talent, and then you also have to give the young guys that opportunity, and the opportunity is, the cost is double, because if that player comes up and doesn't perform, you have to give them a long enough window to know if they're going to work or not, so you don't trade them away and then they perform for someone else. So you're stuck with a product that's sometimes less. And then there's also the other side of it, which is sometimes they come up and just don't perform at all, and they aren't the answer, and then you've lost that time as well. So it kind of puts you in this loop of mediocrity, or worse, because you're constantly having to try out new players to see if they can be successful. And yeah, some like Quan hit the ground running, but I mean, who else has done that offensively for this team in the last decade? There's not a lot of those guys. It's, Jose didn't do that. It's Lindor and it's Quan, and there's not too many others besides that who really got up, stayed, and maybe Santana. It's a very limited crew who did that right from the jump. So when you aren't keeping anyone, it kind of keeps you in a position to be what they've been this last decade, which is good enough to make it and on the right day to advance, but not good enough to where you're ever going to feel like you're the favorite in a round of the postseason. But you out there listening are all my favorite listener, each and every one of you. You're all my favorite. So thank you for joining us, rating and reviewing, downloading. It helps. Again, comment below. Make sure to hit that thumbs up. Do all those little things. That's the free stuff you can do to help the show grow. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to my ramblings on the solo show today. I hope you enjoyed it. Tell me your favorite or least favorite part. Please be kind. And go Guardians, go.